I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is our public meeting, Tuesday, November 5th. With regard to attendance, we have regrets from Trustee Leclerc and Trustee Sipcar, and I know that Trustee Buckler is in the building, is in a meeting, but she's here. I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda with the addendum that you have. Trustee Nelson, Trustee Cook, all those in support. On the agenda, Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just have a feeling that there may be some questions that I have that might fall into a private session that we might have to rise and report into a private session. So I just want to give that heads up. I'm going to try not to, but if there is, I'm giving notice now. And the nature of the area is personnel. It's both staff and negotiations, you know.
So my suggestion is that you think about directing your questions one-on-one to the director's office, unless it's critical that it has to go to all the trustees.
Well, it'll be on deciding an item on this agenda.
Okay, well.
So I'm just giving a heads up so that it may not happen, but we do have to declare it in public before going into a private session. So as of the approval of the agenda, I'm just giving a heads up that there might be an item where I put a motion to go into private session.
Okay, thank you. All those in support of the agenda? That's carried. A motion to convene to private session for an item regarding property. Trustee Cook, Trustee Burgess, all those in support? That's carried. Thank you very much. We're now recessed into private session, and we will reconvene at 7 p.m. Thank you. Everyone, I'm going to call the public board meeting back into session. And I would like to start the meeting by inviting Director Houston to give the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We acknowledge that we are on the land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and the Allied Nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nation, Inuit, Métis.
Thank you very much. And now the director will be doing a special order of the day, and I would ask that everybody please rise.
It is with profound sadness that we announce the passing of Soham Lane, a beloved student in our STEPS program. Soham first joined Kingsville District High School 2 years ago, and more recently this year spent a brief but impactful time at Essex District High School. He was truly one of a kind, a source of joy and inspiration to everyone fortunate enough to know him. Despite his challenges, Soham approached each day with an infectious smile, an unbreakable spirit that inspired his peers and his teachers. His warmth, kindness, and unwavering determination to grow touched countless lives. His presence in our classrooms, hallways, and school events brought light to an even of the darkest moments. Soham was more than just a student. He embodied the power of positivity, perseverance, and love. He brought out the best in those around him, and his absence will be deeply felt both by the Kingsville and the Essex school communities. As we mourn this heartbreaking loss, we'll also remember an invaluable lessons that Soham has taught us about compassion, about patience, and about the importance of inclusion. Our thoughts and our deepest sympathies are with his family during this very difficult time. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Houston, and from the trustees, our sincere condolences to Soham's family. It's very sad. Moving to item E, declaration of conflict of interest for this meeting. Seeing none. Actions from the board's private session meeting. Trustee Nelson, sorry, had a mental block.
No problem. Yes, item D, a matter of property. Did I get a first? Trustee Cook, seconded by Trustee Armstrong. All in support? All opposed? Thank you. Carried.
Thank you. Item G is approval of the minutes from the board meeting of October 15th. I have a mover, Trustee Cook, supported by Trustee Buckler. Anything on the minutes? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I note that I gave regrets, and I know the rules are changing next year. I'd like to get into the practice by giving the reasons, and I did want to say it was due to a matter of bereavement. I had a close family member die that day. Thank you.
Is that for information, or were you asking for a...
To have the minutes reflect the fact that I gave regrets due to bereavement.
But we can't adjust the minutes because that wasn't reported in the minutes.
Oh, it wasn't announced? I
It
asked
was-
in writing that you say it, but you didn't.
All we needed to do at this point was give regrets, and that's all I think I did at
I
the
couldn't
time.
hear it on the thing,
Yeah,
so.
sorry.
Okay. Well, then, just for information then.
Yeah, thank you. All those in support of the minutes? Any opposed? That's carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. On to our student trustee presentations. Who's going ahead? Okay.
Good evening, trustees, Director Houston, senior administration, and members of the public. As the winter season is approaching and fall is slowly drifting away, student councils have been busy with several activities in October with Halloween costume contests, spirit weeks, coffee house, pumpkin decorating contests, can drives, and Pink Day fundraisers in support of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Additionally, councils have begun organizing semi-formals, winter fundraisers, bake sales, and more. During our Student Senate meeting at Kennedy Collegiate Institute, we welcomed BANA to discuss Eating Disorders Awareness Week in February. Our focus is to help promote body positivity within our high schools. Thank you to Director Houston and Superintendent Bell for sharing the results from the 2023-24 School Climate Survey so we could address the issue of body positivity. We have asked Student Senate to fill out a survey regarding how to approach different activities and promotions throughout the week. Tianu and I would like to thank Marissa Casey, Miriam Caudry for presenting, and Charisse Pauley and Jennifer Badoui for being in attendance, and I apologize if I've pronounced those names incorrectly. In addition, we had framed our group discussion period around the inclusion of gender, sexuality, body image, and ethnicity. Our Student Leadership Conference is coming up quickly. To ensure the conference runs smoothly, we are wrapping up our final meetings with student senators to grasp an understanding of how our schedule, skill building activities, and discussion groups will function. Tianu and I are grateful to be given the opportunity to host this exciting event. To support students who are speaking at the Student Leadership Conference, Tianu hosted a public speaking seminar on how to speak in front of large audiences. We are excited to see senators inspire student leaders with their own personal leadership journeys. We wish Tianu well at the upcoming Osta Eco Fall General Meeting in Toronto. Thank you, trustees and Director Houston, for supporting our professional development activities this year, and we are truly grateful.
Thank you. And we have a student of the month? Yes.
The student of the month for November is Ryan Vanuya, a grade 12 student at Tecumseh Vista Academy. Ryan is an outstanding role model for this month's theme of inclusivity. At Tecumseh Vista, every student is unique in their own way, and Ryan makes a conscious effort to make students feel welcome and included. Time and time again, Ryan demonstrates that regardless of one's identity and differences, everyone's voice and opinion matter. This year, as a leader in the art club, Ryan provides an outlet for students to speak their mind and have their voices heard. Ryan has focused an artistic lens on social issues and mentors students by providing thoughtful feedback to guide their work. When asked about their impact on the arts at Tecumseh Vista, one of the peers answered, "They are an amazing friend who always puts others before themselves, even if they don't know them at all." Ryan is one of the leaders at Art Club who always tries to include everyone in the conversation and makes everyone's ideas heard. Ryan's involvement in Tecumseh Vista's GSA has created a safe space within the school. They have been a great help with Pride Month by organizing a bake sale that raised hundreds of dollars for Rainbow Railroad, a not-for-profit organization that helps LGBTQIA+ people get to safety worldwide. Ryan's efforts shine as a beacon for inclusivity every single day. They aim to make high school a fun experience, and they are always looking to include students in activities to ensure everyone feels welcome. Congratulations, Ryan, for being selected by Student Senate as November Student of the Month for the theme of inclusivity.
Is Ryan here? Oh, come on up. Family can come up too. If you have friends or family with you, they can come up too and take pictures. Okay. Next on our agenda is item J, delegations. And trustees, you received the addendum. There are 7 delegations tonight, all speaking to item K1. So we'll start with number 1 on the list. Antonella Ciampa from ETFO. There. You can begin your presentation.
Good evening, trustees, and all those in attendance. My name is Antonella Ciampa, and I am honored to serve as the first vice president of the Greater Essex Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. First, I would like to commend all of you for your courageous decision last June to approve the board's 2024-2025 operating budget, even in the face of a 1.4% in-year deficit. This was no small feat. Your commitment to prioritizing the needs of our students, staff, and the Windsor-Essex community demonstrated immense dedication and foresight. As you know, the Minister of Education conditionally approved this deficit in September, requiring the board to submit a multi-year financial recovery plan aimed at achieving a balanced budget by 2026-2027. This is the context in which I stand before you today. While I recognize the current financial picture, it is deeply concerning that our most vulnerable elementary students, particularly those with special needs, are being impacted adversely by these budgetary decisions. The root of this issue lies not in the board's spending, but rather in the flawed funding formula that has not been updated in over 2 decades. This outdated formula fails to address the growing complexities of our student population and leaves us grappling for structural deficits. The inadequacy of special education funding has reached a crisis point. From student transportation to mental health services, we see consistent patterns of underfunding, which put our students at a disadvantage. The government has created this crisis by shifting the burden of balancing budgets onto local boards, leaving you to navigate these challenges with insufficient resources. These budgetary shortfalls create an obstacle for the education system. Rather than taking a proactive approach to addressing student need, the education system continuously reacts to such things as academic gaps, staff recruitment and retention, and increasing violence in our classroom. The multi-year financial recovery plan outlines several guiding principles, including the imperative to support our most vulnerable students. However, alarming reductions in crucial personnel, such as psychologists, social workers, and speech and language pathologists, suggest a troubling compromise on student well-being. We are all aware of the mental health crisis afflicting our society, and yet we are sacrificing special education staff at a time when they are needed most. Families in Windsor and Essex County, particularly those living in poverty, rely on the public education system to provide essential support that is otherwise inaccessible. The plan mentions that supports for students currently in the RISE program will undergo restructuring. We must question what that truly means. Is it a euphemism for cancellation? Central positions are also being eliminated as per the plan, but does not mention what positions. What are they? Students enrolled in the RISE program are on average at least 2 years behind their peers. Relying solely on universal design for learning and differentiated instruction is insufficient to bridge this gap. These students require more personalized one-on-one support. Inclusion without adequate resources and support can feel like abandonment. While inclusion in the homeroom setting may benefit some, we must remember that education is not a one-size-fits-all solution. The board's special education plan asserts that all exceptional pupils shall have access to the special education services, programs, and placements necessary to meet their individual needs. And yet, we face alarming possibility of cutting a program and staff that have effectively addressed those needs. Listening to the experiences of educators is also vital, as they provide invaluable insight into the realities of the classroom. For instance, one grade 8 teacher who has been in the profession for 21 years disclosed that this school year has been the most stressful and challenging she has ever faced. She currently has a class of 30, of whom 9 students have individual education plans, includes one working at a grade 3 level, another at grade 4-5, and yet another at grade 6, without taking into account the 3 to 4 students on the safety and behavior plans. With learning support teacher assistant limited to just 2 periods a week, her classroom lacks the additional support those students desperately need and deserve. More support staff is needed. Eliminating RISE, a program dedicated to fostering a safe and nurturing environment for students to thrive, is not the solution. Think back to a time when you attempted to learn something new, like playing a musical instrument, and faced challenges. Maybe you found yourself struggling to keep up while others around you effortlessly played the scales and the songs, leaving you feeling inadequate and hesitant to ask for help. This is a reality that many special education students could face if RISE were to be eliminated. But unlike you, they do not have a choice to opt out of their education. The RISE program creates a learning atmosphere that promotes growth and positivity, two critical elements. Here, students are encouraged to take risk and build on the strengths while developing essential social, emotional, and advocacy skills. The individualized accommodations available within RISE often cannot be replicated in a homeroom where time and resources are stretched thin due to large class sizes and diverse needs. Guidance around the system change outlined in the consultant report states that successful system change requires time and investment, and that any restructuring of the RISE program should be done with consideration of the impact on current students, families, and educators, and that shifting to an inclusion model requires approximately 3 to 5 years. The proposed plan speaks to the immediate elimination of the program in the next school year. This falls quite short from the recommended transition time and is unfortunate that the driving factor is finding cost-saving measures. Now is the time for collective action. I propose trustees join educators, parents, SEAC representatives, and students to advocate for meaningful change to our funding formula. It is time for Premier Ford and the Minister of Education to confront the reality of underfunded education and the devastating choices it forces upon our young learners. We are at a critical juncture. Public education is facing unprecedented challenges that jeopardize the future of our students. The ongoing funding crisis is an issue that transcends our local efforts. It demands accountability from the provincial government. We should not be acting out of fear of potential government intervention, but instead be resolute in standing up for our student needs. Approving this multi-year plan continues to be a Band-Aid fix, as costs will continue to rise and the funding will continue to be inadequate. How much further cuts will need to be made after 2027? Reduction initiatives have already been implemented, such as reducing LST, RISE teachers, reducing textbooks, classroom supplies, and adjusting building temperatures across the system. Cuts per student for the 2024-2025 school year, in comparison to 2018, are at $1,500 per student. That gap will only widen in the next few years, and that will only widen if the funding formula is not addressed. How much further cuts will need to be made to balance future budgets without scaling back to the bare bones of our buildings and resources necessary for student learning? The reductions we are witnessing, such as the elimination of RISE in our K-8 schools, threaten the robustness of our special education programs. This is not merely a matter of realignment, it is a critical issue that affects the lives and futures of our students. Together, we can advocate for the resources our students deserve. Let's unite to launch a local movement that champions the rights and needs of every child in our public education system. We have a responsibility to protect and strengthen our system. Its effectiveness is a reflection of our collective commitment to justice, progress, and the well-being of future generations. It is time to ensure that our schools provide the necessary resources and support for every student to thrive. I ask you this: are you champions of public education? What do you envision your legacy to be as a trustee for this board? Will it be defined by balancing a budget, or will it reflect your commitment to standing up for the most vulnerable children we serve and educate? Why vote yes now for a plan that you voted against in June? What's changed in 3 months? Are you here to merely fulfill the requirements of accountants, or are we here dedicated to nurturing and supporting the learning of every student? You have the opportunity to choose. Will you allow yourselves to be used as a pawn of the provincial government, or will you rise as heroes of your community? The decision ultimately rests with you. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You must do the thing you think you cannot do." Thank you for your attention and support in this vital matter. I urge you to reject the multi-year financial plan and defy both the Ministry of Education and the provincial government. I leave you with a quote by Thomas Jefferson, where he states, "In matters of style, swim with the current, but in matters of principles, stand like a rock. Be that rock." Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We need to move, please.
Am I supposed to sit?
I'm going to ask for everyone's cooperation, or I will have to clear the gallery. Please, we have a lot of speakers to get through. Sorry? No, I'm talking about the gallery, not you, Antonella. Are there any, if you want to go back to the mic, are there questions from trustees for clarification? Yeah. I have one. Thank you. Thank you, Antonella, for your presentation, and I appreciate you recognizing that this is a provincial funding based issue. And my question is, because you talked about motivating everybody, and I know that ETFO knows that this board has always advocated for more funding, more realistic funding. I know that ETFO knows that. We have shared correspondence that we have sent for many years, especially addressing our special education needs. So it's not that we have been idle on that. But what I want to know is if you could clarify from what you said, what is ETFO doing provincially to advocate for improved educational funding? Because you said that we need to get motivated to do it, but you didn't say what ETFO is doing.
So there's a campaign called Building Better Schools that actually talks about the cuts that the government is doing. ETFO lobbies every single day for the right for students to an education. We know that the funding formula is flawed, and we are constantly pushing back and saying the funding formula is flawed. And until we stand up as a united group, whether we're administrators, school boards, union people, community people, and say to the board, enough is enough, we're tired of doing more with less, nothing's going to change. So ETFO continuously advocates that. They're lobbying at downtown Toronto. They're lobbying with the MPPs. We're constantly putting together provincially and locally events that speak to this and mobilize and engage members of the community and our teachers, educators, to do the right thing. So that would be my reply.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Our second speaker is Alana Meisel. Hi. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alana Meisel. I'm the parent of a child that's supported at school through the RISE program. I'm here to speak on an issue that affects the heart of our community, the educational supports for children with learning disabilities and exceptional needs. I'm here to talk about a program that has been a beacon of hope for many families, including my own, the Reaching Individual Success in Education, or RISE program, and why it is essential that this board acts to protect it. I am urging the members of the board tonight to deny or to defer the recommendation to approve the multi-year financial recovery plan as presented. The financial recovery plan specifically targets the RISE program, and if approved, will eliminate the targeted program and will eliminate the consistent special education support for children in this program. There are hundreds of students and children who will be negatively impacted if this proposal is passed. If this recommendation is passed as presented, the board is abandoning children with special needs. While I certainly appreciate the importance of addressing the funding deficit, and I appreciate that the issue starts with inadequate provincial funding, we must be mindful of the lasting impact the decision of this board on this financial recovery plan will have on some of our most vulnerable students, specifically children with disabilities. So let's talk about RISE. The Reaching Individual Success and Excellence program is a partially integrated special education classroom. The RISE program is designed to support students with a designated exceptionality. The focus is on language, arts, and math. And within that program, individualized programming, which is uniquely suited to each student's strengths and needs, is provided. The RISE program supports students who do not thrive in a regular classroom. This program was designed to address the inadequate environment in a regular classroom to support the needs of students with disabilities. The program supports children who do not learn at the same pace of their peers. The program has been a lifeline for students who prefer not to attend school because of how challenging a regular classroom can be for them. The program is the only support my child receives at school for his education. The multi-year financial recovery plan seeks to eliminate RISE under the guise of a so-called restructuring in order to address the $6 million deficit. The solution is on the backs of children with disabilities. The solution proposed in the multi-year recovery plan to address the deficit primarily targets the student disability community, and from that standpoint, it is discriminatory. The report describes the proposed changes as a restructuring. However, it appears that the actual consequence is a complete elimination of the program. It would be helpful to clarify this distinction so all stakeholders fully understand the impact of these proposed changes and cuts. The notion of restructuring is grounded in the act or process of changing something, recreating or reimagining. That's not what's happening here. The proposal results in RISE being eliminated without any plans for supports in lieu of same. It's essential that this board communicate transparently about the program's future and what is going to replace it to avoid any misunderstanding or misrepresentation. The reality, the truth, appears to be that the proposal serves to eliminate the program and has laid absolutely no groundwork for the supports that will need to be put in place for next year. And of course, supports with no money, seemingly. The RISE program was designed with one fundamental purpose: to give every child a chance to succeed. For children with learning disabilities and special needs, the typical classroom environment can be overwhelming. In fact, a regular classroom is a barrier to learning for some children. Many struggle to keep pace with a system that all too often is not built for them. These students are frequently left behind, not because they lack potential, but because they lack the tailored support and resources that would enable them to thrive. RISE is more than just an educational program. It's a lifeline for students, including my son. It's a program that was designed to break down barriers and accommodate children with identified exceptionalities. It provides individualized support and strategies and accommodations that are essential for them to meet their potential. It brings specialized teachers, counselors, and aides who understand the unique challenges faced by children with disabilities and who are trained to respond to their needs. The program equips students not just academically, but gives them the confidence to believe in their own abilities. Cutting the RISE program is not merely a budgetary decision, it's a decision that will have deep human consequences. By removing the program, we're sending a message that our community, that our school board, will turn its backs on some of the most vulnerable members. We are essentially telling these children and their families that they are not worth the investment. It's an affront to the principles of equity and inclusivity that we as a community should hold dear. Disability accommodation is not just a legal obligation, it's a moral one. And when we neglect these accommodations, we're ignoring the basic rights of our children in the education system. Focusing on the proposal itself, I'd like to draw your attention to the following areas. At page 11, addressing cost reduction initiatives. There are items on this list that have not been quantified and should be. How much is the board spending on office supplies? How much is the board spending on professional development and supplies for administration? One would hope that the board would be prepared to restructure or eliminate all funding for classroom supplies before it eliminates funding for special education. My child doesn't need a new chair or a new pencil. He needs an education. At page 18, the report addresses the impact of the purported restructuring of RISE, and it notes areas of concern. Those areas of concern are noted as, 1, that the program resulted in mixed academic results. I don't even know what that means. Number 2, that the program limits exploring other more effective support services. My question is, what support services? I'm not aware of what they are. And are we referring to support services provided in school and by the board? Because if so, I'd like to know what they are, because my son doesn't have access to them. Number 3, that families are seeking external services outside of the support of RISE. Of course we are. If we have the privilege to seek outside service, we have children that have exceptional needs. And let's not fool ourselves. RISE is just a partial support when they're in school. If some parents have the privilege to garner extra support for that children, that is not a basis upon which to punish exceptional children by eliminating the only program that supports them at school. Lastly, that the board will leverage this opportunity to examine a more inclusive environment for its students. My question is, what is the board leveraging? Is the board's plan to leverage the money they're saving on special education to conduct an exploration into what can be done to create a more inclusive environment? And if so, I'll say this: inclusion is founded on the notion of equality and equity. We cannot achieve inclusion or equitable standards by treating everyone the same. Children with exceptionalities and learning disabilities must receive accommodations and treatment that differs from the average non-disabled student. Throwing these students back into a regular classroom does not achieve inclusion. All it will do is highlight their differences and create insurmountable hurdles for their teachers and their peers. While I certainly appreciate the effort that has went into the proposal, and certainly I applaud the decision that the board made last year in approving RISE, I have some significant concerns about the approach and the implications of the current proposal. I'm strongly recommending a reassessment, ensuring that it aligns more closely with the principles of respect, inclusivity, and empowerment for all students within this board. I asked my son what he thought about there not being a RISE program next year. He's 8. He started to cry, and he said that he loves RISE, and that RISE is what helps him learn at school. He expressed his frustration about having to re-enter a regular classroom where he might be singled out because he doesn't learn the same way as his peers. If you are on the fence about how to balance the budget and support these children, I encourage you to deny or defer this decision. Ask yourself, what would you do if this was happening to your child, your nephew, your grandchild? Again, I am urging this board to deny the current multi-year financial recovery plan and instead prioritize a plan that seeks sustainable solutions without sacrificing the futures of the students who rely on RISE. Let's work together to find a more responsible and inclusive path forward and make the Greater Essex District County School Board a great place to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do trustees have questions for clarification? I do. I know this is very personal and very emotional. I also have a grandchild with special needs, and they aren't being met currently by our school board, so I understand from both sides. And I've also been a trustee for a very long time, so that I know that from time to time program delivery models do change. And so from your remarks, if you could clarify for me the remark about students with special needs being abandoned. Have you been told that by our administration? Because that's not usually what we strive to do.
Well, I haven't heard from any person working for the board that their intention is to abandon any child. However, I suppose my position was more metaphoric. When you eliminate programs that serve people with disabilities, that is a form of abandonment because you have left them without the services they need to be accommodated and to learn in that environment. So I'm not suggesting that any official used the word abandonment. That was my way to characterize the elimination of the RISE program.
Okay. Thank you. So just to clarify from both sides, I have seen programs eliminated because the delivery model is being changed. So I just wanted to clarify that for everybody that I know is listening intently to this. And one last question, because you were pretty thorough about your concerns about the report and about the proposal. And I just wanted to make sure that you, because it sounded from your remarks that you didn't think this was going to happen, but there is a commitment in the report to meet with our Special Education Advisory Committee as well as the public and parents about how to move forward. So could you just clarify that you did pick that up in the proposal? Because it sounded like you were saying that, that nobody would have any input.
I understand that there are future meetings that will be scheduled, that will take place, that will essentially, in my view, discuss what they can do without funding to support children with disabilities. So yes, I do understand that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Our third delegation is Jacqueline Andersich. Jacqueline? Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Hi, ladies and gentlemen, trustees of the Greater Essex County District School Board, educators, parents, and concerned members of the community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on a critical issue that affects not only the students who rely on special education, but also the collective commitment to an equitable and inclusive educational environment. My name is Jacqueline Anders. I'm a concerned parent of a child who has benefited from the RISE program and special educational services such as speech therapy, CYWs, and LSTs. I want to discuss the proposed elimination of the RISE program and special education support with an end goal of saving money. Special education services are not a luxury or an extra line item to be adjusted at will. They are an essential foundational part of our educational system that ensures every student has an opportunity to succeed. These services offer critical support for students while disabilities and learning challenges support that often makes the difference between a child thriving and a child being left behind. Every child deserves a chance to reach their potential, to grow and succeed in a supportive and understanding environment. But cuts to special education risk denying that right to a group of students who already face substantial challenges. Let's consider the implications of these cuts on their lives and futures. Special education cuts mean fewer resources for students who already need more assistance to access learning. For many students with disabilities, an individualized education plan, an IEP, specialized teaching staff, and tailored resources are essential to engage with the curriculum in a meaningful way. Removing or reducing these supports can leave them unable to keep up with their peers, widening achievement gaps and perpetuating cycles of frustration and failure. Imagine being a child who struggles in reading or communicating and knowing that there's less support coming your way. Imagine being a parent who knows their child's potential, but sees that potential hindered by a lack of resources. Imagine being a teacher asked to do more with less, spread thinner and thinner to cover all students' needs without the support they deserve. These are realities that accompany special education cuts. Here's a quote coming directly from a 14-year-old girl who was in RISE from grades 2 to 8 and now currently is in the MAPS program at the Leamington High School. She said, "What are the kids going to do? They're not going to get help. The teacher in the class with everybody will get mad if a learning disability student has to ask for help. I need lots of help." Upon asking my 8-year-old son, 7, almost 8-year-old son, he's concerned about becoming lost and overwhelmed without the support from his RISE teachers. In his words, he's very sad about the proposed solutions. The RISE program and special education supports have been cornerstones of our educational system, providing critical services to students who need extra help to succeed. The decision to eliminate these programs is driven by financial considerations, but is essential to understand the broader implications of this move. On the surface, there may appear to be immediate financial savings, such that eliminating these programs may seem like a way to reduce expenses. The RISE program and special education supports require significant investment in specialized staff, resources, and training. Removing these programs may provide short-term financial relief to the budget. However, the long-term costs of eliminating the supports far outweigh the immediate savings. Students who rely on these programs to thrive academically and socially may struggle without them, leading to increased dropout rates, lower academic performance, and higher rates of disciplining measures or issues. These outcomes not only affect the students' futures, but also place a long-term financial budget or burden on the community through increased social services, lost productivity, and potential incarceration costs. Families will be deeply affected by the loss of these programs. Parents and guardians who rely on the RISE program, the special education support, will face significant challenges in meeting their children's needs. This burden can lead to increased stress, social strain, and even job loss if the parents have to take on additional caregiving responsibilities. The broader community will also face the impact. Inclusive education supports diversity and fosters empathy, creating a more inclusive and understanding society. Eliminating these programs sends a message that we are not committed to supporting all members of our community, which can erode the social fabric and community values. In other words, investing in special education is not morally sound, it's financially responsible. Our commitment to special education reflects the values of compassion, inclusion, and respect for human rights. When we cut these programs, we send a message that some students' needs are less important than others. But I believe, and I hope you do too, that every child in our district deserves to feel valued and have the opportunity to succeed. No child deserves to be excluded, to be discriminated against, or to be made to feel less than. In conclusion, while the elimination of the RISE program and special education supports may offer short-term financial savings, the long-term costs in terms of student outcomes, family stress, and community well-being are far greater. Restoring and enhancing funding for special education is not only the right thing to do, it's a wise thing to do for the future of the students and the community. We must remember that a strong school system is built on the foundation of equity and inclusion. Let's choose to invest in a future where every student can thrive regardless of the challenges they face. Trustees, it's time to make a bold move, one that is needed for change. Advocate for the kids while not yielding to budgetary pressures. Do not approve this proposal. Put this back on the provincial government, highlighting the real issue at hand. Let them take accountability while protecting the interests of these children. This decision should not be dumped in your laps. Let the government know that we have run out of feasible options and that we will not stand for anything that affects our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Do trustees have any questions for clarification? Maybe I'll just ask on your last point there, where you made reference to the provincial government and that they need to be held accountable.
Yes.
And I just wondered if you could clarify any thoughts about how parents might be able to do that, or have you shared your story, perhaps with your local MPP or the provincial government?
I have personally emailed Anthony Liardi's office, Andrew Dowie's office, Lisa Gretzky's office. I have all their emails and phone numbers. If anybody is looking to contact them, I would be more than happy to share it. I've expressed my opinion and my story. Similar families, their stories as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The next delegation is Francine Salinitri and Magazi Wright. Welcome.
Good evening, trustees. I am here tonight as a parent of two students deeply invested in the IB program at Riverside Secondary School. One of my children is in the IB diploma program, while the other is in the IB pre-IB program. We chose Riverside because of the academic rigor of the unique, globally recognized IB curriculum it offers, an experience we were promised when my children applied in grade 8. Tonight, I stand before you as a parent and a Parent Council Riverside IB representative on behalf of all the families who have committed to this program and entrusted this board with their children's education. I am here to ask you to honor that commitment. Allow the current grade 9 and 10 students to complete the IB program they were promised. These young children left their neighborhood schools and communities to join a learning environment they believed would prepare them for post-secondary education. They have put their trust in Riverside, in the teachers and mentors they have come to rely on, and in the friendships that sustain them. Transitioning to high school is challenging for all students. This is why ministry provides funding for initial transitions. Now imagine these students transitioning unnecessarily from grade 9 or 10 back to their community schools. How will you provide the needed support for these students? when they require a transition again against their will. Now you are telling the students they will lose the peer connections, teacher relationships, and extracurricular activities that form the foundation of a high school experience. It is devastating. Research shows that disruptions like these can lead to academic disengagement, social isolation, and a decrease in overall well-being. This deficit is not the pre-IB students' burden to bear. It is not of their making, and yet our children will pay the price if we continue down this path. By forcing them out of the IB program and back to their community schools, you are asking them to abandon their dreams, but signaling that their efforts and aspirations are expendable. We were blindsided by this recommendation. Had a parent in our community not thoroughly read through the board meeting package posted late Friday afternoon, we would have never known that this decision was being made today. This board's plan states on page 17 of the agenda package, item number 4, that you will phase out IB secondary and pre-IB programs. However, in the associated column, it is contradicted by the statement that pre-IB programs will be eliminated in 25-26. This is deeply problematic. Precedent has been set in Ontario, where Cobourg Collegiate Institute did a phase out of the IB program, allowing all enrolled IB, pre-IB grade 9 and 10 students to complete the program. Mind you, parents were still upset at the decision to remove a globally recognized program. As trustees, you have a responsibility to uphold the commitments you made to these families. You promised all grade 9 students and 10 and their parents that you would graduate them with IB diplomas or certificates. My understanding is that the IB program was approved as a competitive pathway and to increase enrollment. Riverside enrollment has increased to over 1,000 students. Did you consider that 100 students may be displaced? This could result in a loss of enrollment, which is over $13,000 per student subsidized by the government, and could result in a loss of over $1.4 billion to the board budget when the students regrettably choose to attend IB in growing Catholic system, the French board, or public schools. Every other board in this region except ours will offer IB. Did you seek input from stakeholders? This decision impacts students, parents, and community members. Did you explore other avenues to address this deficit without sacrificing our children's futures? For example, reducing restructuring transportation or charging IB students a fee like Assumption Catholic Secondary School's fee plan for their program. This decision to save money on the backs of students is not acceptable, and this decision contradicts every single strategic priority this board claims to uphold. Quote, creating confident learners through personalized learning, supportive environments and trusting relationships, engaging communities through equitable and reflective practices that respect and honor our diversity, and demonstrating ethical stewardship through thoughtful and intentional use of financial, human, environmental, and community resources. But where is the ethical stewardship when a board breaks its promise to the very families who entrusted it? Where is the commitment to supportive environments when these students are asked to give up their community schools, their safe place? Riverside has been recognized endlessly by community organizations for its exceptional contributions to volunteerism and leadership by the IB World Organization through the most recent successful program review, which involved input from parents, students, staff, and your senior administration. This transition will cost current students in pre-IB their credits, put them back a year with younger students in the Careers and Civics course, and impact their optional courses because of strategic timetabling that had to occur in preparing these students for the diploma program. And now you're erasing the fundamental pathway of learning of these students. Let me reinforce the impact of this decision to cutting programs for grade 9s and 10s for IB, who come from all areas over Windsor-Essex County. This will overwhelmingly result in social emotional decline and will decrease well-being and academic outcomes where students lose their identity. and that was personalized as a priority and a promise from this board. The IB program uniquely provides additional diploma and advanced standing in universities, saving students potentially 1 year of tuition costs, especially for those families in financial need. The sense of preparedness that graduates have reported is second to none. This program has increased the diversity of student population at Riverside, enhancing cultural competencies within the student body, and providing a very inclusive, caring environment and positive connections with educators and peers. Again, this deficit is not the pre-IB students' burden to bear, and the decision should not be taken lightly. It is your civic responsibility to consider the impact it will have on these students and families and the future of Riverside. At the very least, we request that you allow the currently enrolled grade 9 and 10 students to remain at Riverside and complete the IB diploma or certificates.
Bonjour, Kinawea, Mishkiki Nishinikaz, Mishikeram Da, Dashkanziving Donjba. Hello guys, my name is Megaze. Some of you guys may know me, some of you guys may not. But I am here today to address the situation that has been brewing up at Riverside Secondary since the board has decided to recommend the cancellation of the IB program. Before you make that decision, I want to say a couple things. I am here representing my fellow pre-IB students that will be affected by the school board's decision to cancel the IB program at Riverside. Tonight we are speaking not only ourselves, but for 175 students who have worked so hard to prepare themselves for rigorous the IB program that will begin for us in grade 11. We chose to leave our community schools and attend Riverside because of the promises that we were made by the school board for this program. The recruitment process involved an application and an interview. We took these steps with much consideration, knowing that this program would be a challenge for us and bring us advantages to post-secondary destinations. Many of us left our community schools and traveled great distances to get to school every morning. We are a diverse group of students who represent many different cultures, faiths, perspectives, and backgrounds. What we all have in common is a desire to set ourselves up for the future. We are all like-minded students who have passion for learning, culturality, awareness, and want to thrive in globally minded world. We choose the IB program after careful consideration, and now that we have brought in, we are not going to give up that quickly. We will search for other ways to complete our IB education, and if it decides to cancel the IB program, we will be we'll have a chance to go to the Assumption, which means we'll be leaving the public board, and the public board would potentially lose over $2,300,000 funding by the ministry. And now I want to speak to the board from an equity and inclusive perspective.
I'm sorry, but Ms. Salanitri used up most of the 10 minutes, so if you could just wrap up in about 20 seconds, please.
Yep. I'm grateful for given an opportunity to learn and excel such an amazing program, but as you guys decided to get rid of the IB program, most of us will be going to Assumption and forced to go against our beliefs, and the IB program is the most diverse program in the school board, has to offer, ranging from Hindi, Arabic, Chinese, indigenous culture, black or white. This program was designed for everybody, not just to have one race or one set of students in a higher program than the other. It is a diverse community for everybody to achieve something, and that's why I like the IB program. And then you guys are over here making me choose between the school board and the Catholic board, which had made us suppress our culture by making attend residential schools and lose our traditions and culture. And you guys are going to make me choose between the Catholic board and public board because you guys decide to try to save money by taking fund from the IB program. But if you really think about it, you'll be losing money in the long run, because people are going to want to finish the IB program, so they'll be going to Assumption to finish what they have started. And that's why I'm up here today, not only for myself, but to represent 175 other students that want to stay in this program. But I mean, I can't really change your mind, but I can give you another reason why to go through this. Miigwech Bizindem, thank you for listening. And I have letters that was written by another IB students inside Riverside, and I would like to give them to our trustees.
Sure. Can you pass them around, please? Just pass them up. Yeah. If you could just pass it up to someone in administration, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. Are there any questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next speaker is Joanna Conrad, please. Okay. Welcome.
Good evening. I apologize. I have this massive screen in front of me, what my son calls a TV with a keyboard, but I had some technical difficulties. So here we are. So good evening, trustees, director, superintendents, and members of the board. Standing here before everybody this evening is giving me some serious deja vu vibes. Either I've done this before or my GPS accidentally rerouted me to May's meeting. Regardless, for those who may not know me, my name is Joanna Conrad. Some of you might remember me, and others may know me from my work. However, this evening I am here as a member of the Special Advisory Committee, and most importantly, as the mother of 3 elementary-aged children, one of whom utilizes special education. You may recall an age-old phrase countless parents use. If your friend jumped off a bridge, would you? This seemingly simple question challenges us to consider the choices we make, urging us to strive for excellence rather than conformity. When I think about the current administration's stance on special education, this phrase echoes in my mind. We have heard time and time again that the board's special education program is unparalleled, a model of excellence, a quote-unquote Tesla model. Yet, when faced with financial challenges, the board's inclination has been to follow rather than to lead, to surrender rather than to strive. Excellence is not a pursuit we abandon at the sign of adversity. It requires steadfast commitment, a determination to focus on our own progress, even as others falter. Why then should the trustees accept a proposal to phase out the quote-unquote Tesla model of a RISE program without clear plans for replacing these critical supports for our students? Students need support within the school, a place they go to every single day, minus the weekend. While a small portion of the community can afford private tutors, intensive interventions, and professional services, these resources are often temporary and inaccessible for most families. Many families already seek out additional supports and are disheartened to learn that government-funded options are short-lived and plagued by long waits, and private is unattainable and unsustainable, leaving children once again unsupported. It is crucial that schools provide specialized support and tailored programs to ensure all students can thrive and progress along their unique educational paths. Heck, the government said so in 1980 with the passage of Bill 82, which mandated that all school boards in Ontario must provide special education programs and services for exceptional students. By focusing on in-school support, we can foster an inclusive environment that empowers every student to succeed, rather than diminishing services and opportunities. The board takes pride in its commitment to diversity and inclusion. However, the proposal to phase out RISE and essential supports contradicts this mission. These supports are crucial for fostering a sense of inclusion by empowering students with the skills they need in writing, reading, and communication. They help build independence, autonomy, and the ability to form friendships. These elements are fundamental to a truly inclusive environment. Shouldn't these contributions to student confidence and community integration be valued and preserved for the students in question too? The current proposed budget cuts point clearly in the direction of deeper cuts within special education than was proposed in the spring, both to the professional service staff and specifically to the amazing RISE program. Parents had been assured that these specific cuts would not occur and that the board was not going to be placing budget constraints on the backs of our most vulnerable students, the ones in need of a special education classroom learning environment, the ones in need of social work counseling, speech-language interventions, or psychological assessments. Cutting deeply into these programs and departments and eliminating a significant portion of the staff would affect access to programs and supports for students across all schools throughout the entire board. Eliminated workers in professional departments would no longer be here to provide crucial services within their assigned schools, and the remaining workers in each of those departments would have to water down their services in order to accommodate even larger workloads due to the resulting shortages. This watering down of special education and support services through consultative modes rather than direct intervention fails to meet student needs adequately, particularly in critical areas like speech and language. In the spirit of transparency, consultative services mean offering advice, strategies, or guidance in specific areas, so essentially providing textbook solutions to areas of concern. Transitioning to consultative models often amounts to little more than providing teachers with strategies, adding to their already heavy workload and leaving them with insufficient time and resources to effectively support individual student needs. I'm not quite sure how that will help with teacher retention. Additionally, could funds currently allocated to areas like the behavior management support team not be redirected to departments facing cuts? At a time when other departments are decreasing in size, the expansion of the behavior management support team raises the question of whether the board anticipates increased behavioral challenges among students. It is crucial to recognize that consultative services for behavior management are unlikely to succeed in environments plagued by staff shortages and unpredictable situations. Textbook strategies often fall short in real-world settings where resources are stretched thin. A full inclusion model like the one the Catholic Board has, where there are no separate classrooms, with the exception of the Section 23 program, has the expectations that the students spend at least 50% of their time in the classroom. Full inclusion is hard when there are never enough EAs, or supports to go around, which we know is true daily in every school across the board. My suspicion is that when there are not enough supports in the Catholic system, parents seek out the public system. I ask, with RISE gone, what supports will parents in the public system seek out? Another scary thought highlighted in briefing documents obtained through a Freedom of Information requests, Ontario faces a worsening teacher shortage by 2027. The problem is multifaceted, attributed to retiring teachers, increased student enrollment, and unfilled specialized subject demands, notably in special education. These systemic challenges are reflected in the EQ-AO results, where grade 3 and grade 6 reading and writing scores fall short of provincial standards. Scores, by the way, that exclude testing by programs like RISE and GAINS. So what challenges will arise if the RISE program is eliminated? RISE students mainstreamed, teachers stretched even thinner, especially considering the increasing needs of all students with and without an IEP, amidst dwindling support. Despite the board's best intentions, the breadth and complexity of support needs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities are underestimated. Cuts to positions that drive IEPs raise critical questions about the future of these students' educations. Who will oversee and implement IEPs that are already challenging to fulfill due to staff shortages and limited resources? Who will ensure these IEPs are consistently met and updated? Failure to uphold a unique special education model not only jeopardizes these students' futures, but also reflects a concerning acceptance of policy that pays lip service to trustees' recommendations while undercutting the very foundations of special education. Recent administrative decisions to the RISE program have already had wide-ranging negative effects. Cutting the RISE program removes essential support for the increasing special needs population amid staff retention issues and a lack of resources for field trips and IEP accommodations. Furthermore, reports on the RISE program and deficit forecast underscore the financial and logistical hurdles of special education. The spectrum of support varies widely, from minor classroom help to specialized equipment and staffing, with approximately half of supported students having IEPs without a formal identification. The students who actually receive special education supports within the school board are often understated. Not included in the data are tiered supports for students with literacy needs, students who see the learning support teacher at every school because they're deemed at risk. The majority of students receiving social work supports and speech and language interventions are not identified, not to mention the fact that the board and the ministry have moved away from formally identifying students and instead responding to the needs of students through tiered supports, meaning we will not we will continue to see a decline in the numbers of identified students, but not a decline in the number of students who require special education supports. So let that sink in. The numbers are not going down. Our population in Windsor and Essex is growing, as are our children with special identified needs. The need to accommodate all students, regardless of formal classification, is paramount, as the legal mandate to provide special education support remains steadfast. I urge trustees to vote against the recommendations and allow the ministry to take control of the board. We must convey this message clearly. Rejecting these recommendations is essential, and it's time for the ministry to step up, step in, and address the situation. Our families and children deserve the chance to succeed, to thrive. This is not merely an educational challenge, it's a societal one. Let us rise to meet it with the passion and persistence it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you again for your presentation. Are there questions from trustees? I just have one. You mentioned early in your presentation that you are a member of our Special Education Advisory Committee, and you did list a variety of concerns about special education at our board and across the province, and how the ministry is or isn't addressing it. So could you just clarify, since you're a member of the committee, because I didn't hear this clearly in your presentation, but how is CEAC addressing this? Like all the issues with regard to special education, not just our budget issue tonight, but everything you mentioned, how is CEAC responding to that?
That's a great question. I wish that CEAC was able to address it more than it is. Unfortunately, my hopes in terms of joining CEAC have fallen short. My hope was that it was more of an advisory committee and that we had more of a voice to advocate for the most vulnerable. Unfortunately, it sounds more like a checklist item that we end up doing, where we were not even presented with the RISE report that was made public. We have also not been provided with the special education report in advance. These are things that we simply attend the meeting, we're given. There was no vote, there was no motion to pass. Again, a lot of it is a facade, in my opinion. I'd like to see more action.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to point out that CEAC is listed as one of the bodies that will be consulted.
Yes, I'm aware of that. Unfortunately, not always quite the case.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Buckler.
Yeah, I just have a quick question before you walk away. In one of your last statements, it was, let the ministry take over. Like, be bold and let the ministry take over. Do you realize what that means?
Yeah, I do. I realize, because at this point in time, what I think is that the ministry is going to come in and they're probably going to look top down. They're not going to look at the most vulnerable students and take away from them. That's my hope anyway.
I wouldn't bank on that hope.
And I would just like to clarify that from what I know from the ministry, what they will be looking at are unfunded spending expenses. That's the problem at our board. Unfunded spending, unfunded expenses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next speaker is Shelley Dean from PSSP. Shelley? Welcome. And yep, you need to lower that.
Where's Mario when I need him? Is that okay? Okay. What a nice segue. I'm going to talk a little bit about the unfunded positions. So ladies, gentlemen, trustees of the Greater Essex County District School Board, my name is Shelley Dean, and I'm the president of Professional Student Services, and I am disheartened to be here standing in front of you again. Our esteemed trustees listened thoughtfully to the presentations made by our hardworking staff last June, and there was great respect in this room for both the historical and future commitment of the board to support our students who present with the highest needs. Each trustee respectfully took to their microphones and bravely spoke against any plan that would place the burden of this complicated deficit reduction on the backs of our special needs students. Grateful teachers, parents, and special education staff beamed with pride as the Greater Essex County District School Board called on itself to be a leader, both locally and provincially, to meet the needs of all students. Unfortunately, these newly proposed cuts are again pointed in the direction of special education where the needs are ballooning. There were 4,200 students with special needs in 2019-2020, and this year we're up to almost 6,000 students. All of these students require and deserve specialized supports at school. We have been repeatedly told that the professional staff are unfunded and that we are in some way an extra service that the board is not obligated to provide. Comments like these are misleading and a little bit disrespectful. The Special Education Fund is made up of 4 allocations. The per pupil allocation allows for the hiring of teachers, educational assistants, and professionals. Quote, this funding is given to every school board to help with the costs of giving additional supports to students with special needs. There's also the differentiated needs allocation, which has 7 components. It allows for the establishment of multidisciplinary teams of up to 4 staff. These teams build board capacity, support special education assessments, help educators and other staff understand and adapt to the unique needs of their students. The funding for professional services also under the local education priorities. This money can be used for professional staff such as speech-language pathologists and psychologists. There is also money specifically earmarked for speech-language and psychoeducational assessments. Claim-based submissions can be made to purchase specialized equipment and resources for special students if a professional assessment is completed by a psychologist or a speech-language pathologist under the Core Education Funding Directive for the specialized equipment allocation. There's also PPM 81. It includes language about the provision of speech and language services in the schools. It states that school boards employ or contract appropriately trained staff to provide assessment, treatment, and programming. It goes on to state, language competence is an integral component of the classroom program. Therefore, school boards should be responsible for the assessment and provision of services for pupils with language disorders. These services are most effective when they are closely integrated within the classroom program, particularly with language problems associated with learning disability, autism, intellectual and hearing impairment. There's also the Mental Health and Well-Being Grant that provides funding to foster learning, mental health, and well-being of students, including support for frontline mental health workers in secondary schools to provide direct services, reduce wait times, improve access to critical services. Again, critical service. This would include social workers and psychology. There's also the mental health workers staffing amount. This provides targeted funding for the hiring and continued employment of what they refer to as regulated mental health professionals. Regulated mental health professionals means they have the education, training, and a professional license. Again, this is psychology and social work. We're provided with a base amount, and it looks like it's 1.5 times the benchmark of $79,000 roughly, which comes out to almost $120,000. Then there's a top-up component to that as well. There's also money available through the data information and collection amount. This fund supports data collection, analysis, and reporting systems for regulated, school-based mental health professionals. In brackets, that's psychologists and social workers again. This money can also be used to purchase technology like laptops and support the CMS system which we use. There's another fund, the Supporting Student Mental Health allocation, that provides funding to employ mental health professionals who directly support students as well as other things. There's also the professional staff support component, which funds specifically non-teaching positions such as social workers, psychologists, attendance counselors, child and youth workers, educational assistants. And it says that these non-teaching staff are critical to preventing and mitigating risk factors for a significant number of students at risk of suspension and expulsion. So when it comes to the funding, the budget, the funding for special services is complicated, but there are several funds which we can and should be accessed. It is neither fair nor accurate to say that speech-language pathology, psychology, or social work positions are unfunded. The current plan proposes the elimination of 7 FTE positions. However, if contract positions, employees on leaves, and retiring employees are not replaced, this actually will be a greater loss of service. If that's the case, psychology will be reduced from 8.5 to 4.5 FTE. Speech and language will be reduced from 9.0 to 5.0 FTE. And it will be the elimination of the communication disorders assistants altogether. That job class will be eliminated. And these 2 hardworking individuals see a minimum of about 240 students a year. Social work will also be reduced from 14 FTE to 12 FTE. That's a 15% reduction. And I would also like to remind you that the social workers actually bring dollars back into the board via their attendance counseling roles. Cuts to mental health and special education services will not result in a tremendous savings. These are not high-paying positions. There will be no cost savings in terms of absenteeism, as the staff are not replaced when they're ill. The board may actually see an increased absenteeism in other groups as students with special needs are being pushed out of the RISE program and into the regular classroom at the same time that other professional services are being eliminated. In closing, I would also like to remind the trustees of the collective agreement, which we all signed. There is a letter of agreement which specifically addresses job security. That's in the central agreement, and a violation of the central agreement would be a very serious matter. We fully understand that the budget deficit is a complicated issue, but I think we can do better. The provincial government has taxed this board with an unimaginable task, but the board does continue to have a choice in how they wish to respond. Cuts to mental health and special education services are not sustainable and will not resolve the complex budget issues before you. Thank you for your time and your careful consideration of this very important matter.
Thank you, Shelley. Are there any questions from trustees? I just have one question that maybe you can clarify. It's my understanding, and I hope I'm correct, that we do have some funding for positions, for PSSP positions. We don't have funding for the level of positions that we provide, so that there's some gap in the funding, is what I'm saying. So like your point was that we shouldn't say that they're unfunded positions, but because we've gone over what the government funds, then we get into the unfunded.
I think, yeah, you're right, that there are, but to say we're unfunded it's not a fair statement. I think
Right.
though with I think
Correct.
although with some of those other funds, the board has the choice and can use their discretion in terms of how they use that money to fill different positions.
Correct.
But we're not unfunded.
Yes, so we're not totally unfunded.
No.
So, okay, thank you that we agree on that. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the next speaker, Shannon Hazel, please. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a late night, so I'll try not to take all 10 minutes. My name is Shannon Hazel, and I'm a former teacher for the Greater Essex County District School Board. I retired in June of 2023, and I worked for 5 years for Halton Catholic, 20 years for Greater Essex, and the last 6 in special education as a learning support teacher. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my time with Greater Essex as a teacher. And I always took great pride in being a teacher for Greater Essex. I felt like we were always on the cutting edge, forward thinking, ahead of other school districts, being creative and making things happen for our students. And I proudly told people at conferences or union events that I was a teacher for Greater Essex County. And as a in the special education community as a learning support teacher, those were some of the best years that I had in my teaching career. However, at the same time, it became really disheartening and hard to continue on as a teacher, and was a factor in my choice to retire early. So as a learning support teacher, We're involved in all the conversations with parents and families surrounding student needs. We collaborate with the special education team, both at the school level, at the district level, and even at the community level. And it really does take a team to support these learners with needs. And so in my role as a learning support teacher, I weekly, if not daily, collaborated with our school psychologist, speech and language pathologist, child and youth worker, DSWs, the team. It took all of us and all of our individual knowledge and skills to help put together plans for students. And my worry is that by continuing to reduce some of these other positions, we're going to lose that team. We're already stretched thin. There was already many times where they weren't able to, be in the school as scheduled. But it really takes the team. And we're not just losing support for students, we're losing the support for teachers, because I learned more in those 6 years than I learned in the rest of my career from the team. So they're not just there to support students, they're there to build capacity in our educators and our teachers, and we all take that back to our classrooms, our homerooms, whatever our position may be, and we're able to implement the knowledge that, we've learned from them on the front line of teaching. A big part of my role was to sit at the IPRC table and have conversations with parents about their student needs. And the IPRC table, it's not the first time parents are hearing, but it's where they're getting the really clear picture about their child's needs and the trajectory forward and how we're going to support them in a school. And this is where the disheartening part started to come in, to sit at those meetings when a lot of times I would use the word grieving. Parents are grieving what they're hearing about their child and their thoughts about their child's future. They're starting to question and wonder what it's going to be like. We tell them what their child needs. We give them the list of supports, and then we have to follow that up with things like, but there's a 2-year wait list, or we don't have a spot, or they've aged out of that service. So we know what they need, but we're not able to provide it already before any of these cuts to special education. And it's really hard to sit at that table, IPRC meeting after IPRC meeting, having these same conversations and knowing that what we're telling parents is, like somebody else used, almost like a facade. We're telling you to go to these community resources, but we know that they're not going to be able to help you either. We're giving you the list of, where you could get a private psych, but we know the parents can't afford it or don't have coverage. So that's where it became hard for me to continue on in the education system. We talk about teacher absenteeism. We're paying the price somewhere. If we keep removing these supports for not only students but teachers, that problem's going to grow, and we're going to spend the money in occasional teachers, trying to find new teachers, whatever the case may be. When if we can protect our funding and put that money forward, maybe we could lessen the burden, because every time you take something away from special education, you're asking the teacher to fill the gap. You're asking the teacher to become the psychologist, the mental health expert, the social worker. Our plates are full. We're educators. We need our team. We need the supports. We need the resources. And we need to be able to sit at the IPRC table and answer parents and have answers. I support a restructuring plan. I think that, we've always been at the forefront of the research. And I think that if there's a better way for us to support students with needs, then I'm all for it. I would be willing to be a part of it. I would support it. I would speak here and encourage it. I would yell it from the rooftops. But right now it's just in quotations a restructuring plan. And I don't think we can throw out one program without knowing what the restructuring looks like. And so I think we can't make this decision tonight until we know what is that going to look like? Because to me right now, restructuring looks like eliminating. As educators, we often tell students, and I know the senior admin team in front of me has said this to many students, you need to think for yourselves. You need to stand up for what is right, even when it's not easy. If you're a bystander, you're part of the problem, even if you're not the bully. We tell children these things. We expect this standard from our children, But we sit here as adults making decisions for our children, and we don't expect the same from ourselves. So I encourage Greater Essex County District School Board to continue to be at the forefront, to continue to push the envelope, expect more, do more for our students, be a model for other school districts, and find another way to save money that doesn't involve cuts to student programming, whether that be the IB program or special education. We have a brilliant senior admin team. They can figure it out. We have committed trustees, and I know I'm not allowed to speak to the trustees, but I would just like to say to the chair, if I may, that I've heard all the speakers before me, and each time you put back to them, what are they doing personally to advocate for what we're standing up here and saying? But respectfully, I'd like to remind the chair that that is what we elected you for. This is our avenue. You are the people that we can speak to that communicate with the government, and that's why we're coming to you. So it was a bit tough for me to sit here and listen to you question person after person and make them justify why they're at this microphone. You are that avenue, and we need you to take the stand. Thank you.
You're welcome. And because you made comment to me directly, I can respond and say that this isn't something that can be solved by 10 trustees. Provincial funding. Provincial funding is a community issue, and it can only be solved. And other speakers made that point, that we all have to stand together as a community. And you just can't let it be on the shoulder of 10 trustees, because it's not going to happen. We continually advocate, continually, and have for years and years and years. So I don't want anyone in this room to think that it's just our responsibility. It's a provincial funding formula that puts us in this position. It's the provincial funding directive that requires us to have this debt reduction plan. So it's not just all on us. And I believe that sincerely, and that unless the community, and I know that the ETFO president has been here previously and made this message to the community through a presentation, that the community needs to get involved and send the message to Queen's Park. So respectfully, I encourage presenters, delegations to our board, I encourage them to share their stories, share their concerns at the provincial level as well as locally. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Am I able to respond or no?
Well,
No.
it's not a debate.
Okay, it's not a debate.
It's not a
That's
debate.
fine.
It's not a debate. So do any trustees have any questions? No? Okay, thank you very
Thank you.
much. I want to thank all the delegations. I want to thank all the delegations that spoke tonight. This is a very, I know it's a very personal and emotional item for each one of you. I do want to explain that our bylaws allow for only 3 delegations to speak on the same agenda topic. However, the bylaw also gives the authority to the chair and the director to allow more than 3 speakers on the same agenda item. The director and I did discuss the fact that there were more than 3 that applied before the deadline to speak, and we thought that it was important that we hear each one of you. So we agreed to allow all 7 to speak on the same agenda item. And I'm glad that we made that decision. I'm glad that we heard your voices tonight. And I thank you all for coming. This is not an easy decision by any stretch of the imagination. Bottom line is that trustees, just like you, care about kids. We care about all kids, whether they're our kids or our students. We care every single day, as does administration. And we're not here to make decisions that are unnecessary or hurtful to anybody. So, having said that, again, I thank you all very much for your patience through this past hour and a half, and also for the words that you brought tonight. So moving on, I lost my place on the agenda. Where are we? Oh, moving on to new business. K1. K1, we do have a recommendation. Would anyone like to put the recommendation on the floor? Trustee Buckler. Do we have a seconder to put the motion on the floor? Do we have a seconder? Nope. Trustee Burgess. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Trustee Buckler, did you want to speak to it first? You're the mover.
Just that this is a terrifically awful thing to have to look at and to have to do, but the ministry simply is not funding us adequately. And as much as we scream, even through OBSPA, we march down to speak to all of them year on year that they have underfunded us greatly. Our board especially has backed special education. We have taken from every envelope for I've been here 12 years, and for over 10 of them, we have taken from every envelope to keep the special education that we are so proud of and that we love to provide for our students. And I think this is hard for us all to swallow. And it was hard to hear everybody tonight. But if we don't do this now, the ministry will take over. And the ministry's not going to be as kind as we are, knowing our community, knowing our board, knowing what we want to provide for our kids. This is the best we could put forward. We have the best administrative team you could ever want. They all looked at this, they all dug into this, and they've come to us with their very best. This is their very best. And sometimes we just have to do hard things.
Thank you. Anyone else on the motion? Trustee McKinley, then Trustee Burgess, then Trustee Armstrong. Trustee McKinley?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to, I guess, make an amendment that in the form of a motion to extend the phase-out timeline for the secondary IB programming that will ensure that all current pre-IB students currently in grades 9 and 10 be able to complete their IB course until their grade 12 graduation as promised during recruitment. Well, I would want that, I guess, added to it under the IB phase out. We have an IB phase out date that I'm suggesting we amend.
Sorry. The amendment is with regard to IB to you're going to have
to extend the phase out timeline. We have a timeline in the document for secondary IB programming, and that the extended timeline would ensure that all of our current pre-IB students, those being currently in grades 9 and 10, be able to complete their IB courses until their grade 12 graduation as promised during recruitment.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Seconder, Trustee Burgess?
In the condition, I'm looking at, I'm seconding what I think. I want to make sure I heard the amendment, but the recommendation says that the board approve the multi-year financial recovery plan as presented, and I'm going to add a comma with the exception of, and what makes
With
sense?
the exception
No,
of.
that's if the amendment is passed.
This is the amendment. I'm seconding the amendment
Correct.
of adding the words with the exception of on the first thing, and then you can.
All current pre-IB students currently in grades 9 and 10 be able to complete their IB courses until their grade 12 graduation.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the director to comment on the impact of that, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So the cost that would be associated with that would not permit us to meet the requirements of the multi-year deficit recovery plan as presented. We would have to go back for that X amount of money in transportation, in all of the costs associated with IB, to find out what those costs are, to then find, let's say, and I'm picking a number without any information, $500,000, $1 million, we have to go back and find another $1 million because we won't be in compliance with the multi-year deficit recovery plan. The amount that we're providing here is the amount we must submit to the ministry to be in compliance. So if you're adding additional costs, we have to recover those costs somewhere else. Just so everybody's clear about what that decision would be.
So, just to reiterate, if you probably don't remember exactly what the ministry's directives were, but it was very specific in terms of the number, and that's the plan that administration put forward, specific to that number. So any amendment to that number will require an adjustment to the whole plan to bring us back up to that number. So if you're going to reduce it by $500,000, $1 million, whatever, you're going to have to find it in something else to bring it up back up to that number.
And
so,
what about the loss of revenue that we will receive that when those students leave?
That's projection. That's not.
I think it's a pretty
It's
safe
a projection
when other boards offer the IB program, and we're.
So, Trustee Burgess?
Well, this is my question because I supported the amendment because I would like it, to understand if there are any other areas that were even considered. And not having the amendment ahead of time, I can't cost it out. So it's too much to ask because, quite frankly, I thought this would have been at committee level and not at a regular board meeting. So it's usually a committee discussion kind of thing. So do we have any better idea of what that amendment actually costs?
So
and if were there any other options?
So
discussed?
I had asked the question about whether or not we could charge tuition for IB and how much it would cost per student per year, and it was somewhere around $13,000 at minimum. So take 13,000 times, I don't know how many students, 13,000 times, well, that's at one school. That's only at one school. So, yeah. So anyway, it's a lot. It's a big chunk of money.
So complete your thought. I didn't quite get it.
So I don't know how many the students are. So do you take 13,000 times 200, 300? I don't know what the total is from the schools. So anyway. So anyone else on the amendment?
I would not support it.
Amendment. Okay.
Plain and simple, will not support it.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else on the amendment? No. And so I'm going to call the vote on the amendment. All those in support of the amendment? One. No. The amendment fails. Back to the main motion. So on the main motion, it was Trustee McKinley spoke, and then Trustee Burgess on the main motion, and then Trustee Armstrong. Sorry, I went back to the original speakers
so
list.
Trustee McKinley had an amendment, but I believe she actually wants to speak to the motion. Can I just wait and have her speak, and then I'll be second? Because she put forward an amendment before what she wanted to speak to. She was the first speaker. She hasn't spoken.
I think we'll go to Trustee Armstrong, then we'll go back. Trustee Armstrong?
This is all new to me, and ever since I started, you have been advocating that we are underfunded, and it's a constant conversation to people who are listening. This is a constant conversation. So is there any history that we can learn from on this kind of situation? Has this happened before? Is this the worst it's ever been, etc.? Do you have anything? What happens when the ministry takes over? Trustee Buckler said it's going to be awful. What does awful look like?
So I don't have experience with the board or with ministry taking over our board, but it did happen in our community where the ministry did send in a supervisor to the coterminous board. But what happens is if the ministry should choose to do that, then trustees are removed from decision making 100%. The supervisor who is appointed by the ministry makes all the decisions until the ministry decides that they can remove themselves. So I think in the coterminous board, it might have been 2 years, I think it was. My next door neighbor was the chair at the time, so I heard a lot about it. So it was about 2 years that the trustees were removed, and all the decisions were made by that single supervisor on behalf of the ministry. So they can make decisions on whatever they want. Have we ever been in this situation before with regard to having to make cuts? I can categorically say yes. I have been a trustee where we had to eliminate a whole category of employees because they were not funded by the ministry, and we didn't have the money to fill those paychecks. I've had to do that. Well, as a member of the board, we closed swimming pools because we didn't have the money. Not as impactful to all our student body as what we're looking at now, but that was a hard decision. That was a hard decision, and it was hard for the community. It was hard for the trustees. But we didn't have any money because swimming pools aren't funded. So they were closed in all our schools. So those are just a couple examples off the top of my head. And I hope that helps answer your question. Thank you. Back to Trustee McKinley, then Trustee Burgess, then Trustee Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I begin, I'd like to say that in no way do I want my thoughts to be my comments to be interpreted as a reflection upon our staff that were forced to prepare this plan for our approval. It was an impossible task, and I'm always grateful for their dedication to our board. I know that they must have agonized over these recommendations. I shared back in June that the reasons for our deficit were linked to the lack of ministry funding in several areas, and I still stand by that statement. Our staff have been forced by the ministry to create a multi-year deficit reduction plan to balance our budget within 2 years. For all of the years that I've been a trustee, our board has been fiscally responsible. The difference now is that the ministry is not adequately paying us for their financial obligations to our board. With a supply staff deficit of $8.6 million between the projected revenue compared to the projected expense, this category is completely negotiated by the ministry themselves and should be covered completely by the ministry. If the province actually funded us this difference, our budget would not be in deficit. There would be no deficit this year, and the recommendations before us would not even be under consideration. Our report states that our board receives funding to pay for 32 full-time equivalent support staff to support 6,000 students. When you do the math, that equals approximately one staff member per 187 students. That math is why we spend more money for special education students than the ministry provides to us. So for myself, I cannot, as a trustee member that sits on our Special Education Advisory Committee and Supervised Alternative Learning, as well as a member of Greater Essex County Parent Involvement Committee and our Indigenous Education Advisory Committee, agree to do the ministry's dirty work for them. I most certainly will not gut our services or the programs that support our students while the Premier makes announcements to send $200 checks to all Ontario residents and children in the new year before an expected early election announcement. There seems to be over $3 billion at his disposal that our education system and healthcare system could desperately use to both balance budget deficits and increase supports to school boards as well as hospitals across Ontario. I became a trustee to make the best choices for students, all students. These are not the decisions I ever imagined I would be forced to choose between. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to clarify some of your statements. I've talked to many chairs about their situation because we're not a one of on this, and other boards have had to dig very deep to get out of their holes as well, many of them without the luxury of a surplus. So I want to make that clear that we're not alone, but we're number one in terms of being in the worst position. Other boards were given longer timelines to comply, but because our board's problems are systemic, we were given much shorter timelines, which causes me great concern for the potential of supervision. The other thing I would like to clarify from your remarks is that unlike the public, we have a legal obligation for compliance. It's not optional. So I understand how difficult this decision is, but everyone, trustees, the public, need to understand that we are bound by legalities. We don't have an option to comply or not with the ministry directive. The ministry has directed, they haven't directed administration, they have directed trustees to formulate and approve and submit before November 30th a multi-year debt reduction plan. It's not optional. Trustees have a legal obligation to comply with the ministry. It's not an easy decision. And of course we wouldn't want to make it if we didn't have to. Of course we're all here because we want to do the best we can for our students. But we have been directed by the ministry. We don't have an option about compliance. So I would just like to explain that in terms of your remarks. Trustee Burgess, you're next.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm going to speak just directly to you and through you to everybody else. And I don't rise on a point of personal privilege, but I want you to know, everyone to know, that I'm here and I didn't want to be here. I have a heightened level of anxiety and terrible insomnia, and I have had recent bereavement, and I have PTSD, and I have a lot of things going on that make me doubt whether I can cognitively even take everything in. So when I got the package, I didn't have the benefit of the workshop previous that was given a few weeks ago, because that was the day of my relative's death, and I was not in a position to ask the questions, and I'm still really not, but I'm going to ask what I can, and I have some notes, so I'm going to ask for some leeway because I have a lot of questions. I'm going to try to zip through it as fast as I can.
Trustee Burgess, you have to ask one question, then I can come back and you can ask a second.
Okay, I'll discuss first, and then I'll ask a question then.
And
I'll highlight where I'm coming from. So we are being tasked with a recovery from a 1.4% deficit to get it to a 1%. Not that many years ago, during the height of the pandemic, we were given an opportunity to have a 2% deficit. If we were there in lockdown with 2%, we wouldn't be here making cuts. But I look at what we're tasked with, and I'm going to hold up my copies of the Herald News with full-page ads from my MPP, because speakers came forward and said they've spent some time speaking to local MPPs. And
okay, Trustee Burgess, I need you to ask your question.
No, it's not a question. It's debate and discussion on a motion. This is not trustee
so
question
speak
period.
to the motion,
I
please.
will. I am. So, in May and March, it was still being referred to as grants for student needs funding. If we actually had grants for student needs, that would be great. But they're a bit honest in the provincial government. They now call it core education funding. Core education, not grants for student needs. It's just core. And the things that we kept hearing over and over again are back to basics, back to basics, back to basics. And I preface this because the decision I'm making is predicated on my alignment with your thoughts and with Trustee Buckler's thoughts. The question here is not whether we're approving something because we think it's something that we choose voluntarily always to. This would have been in our plans anyway to make these cuts, to the model that we have always been proud of, being progressive and having what I've heard of as a Cadillac, version of special education. We know that we're talking about unfunded by the provincial government, despite what they want to say that we've had increases in our thing. Prices are up. Prices are up, new collective agreements, all the rest. We cannot meet what we already provide. So I knew that when we did the budget, we took a chance that an understanding provincial government and the finance branch might say, you really do, you were in the largest lockdown, you do have some pandemic laws, you do have some extra anxiety, mental, all those things, yes, you are different. There wasn't that customization. The response was, show us your plan, here's the deadline. So that's where I'm at. And if we looked at even the cost of EICPP, I didn't ask the question of clarification because it's not clarification, but for discussion. If we looked at the low-hanging fruit that the government actually, if you're signing a collective agreement, a member of the three parties, union and an employer and the government who's the banker, you sign a collective agreement knowing that we have to pay our employer portion of EI and CPP, and yet you don't fund us for it. That alone could eliminate the 0.4.
Trustee Burgess, on that, we did get a response from the ministry. I did report that to the trustees.
Right.
They fund us for all the positions
that are
fall
funded
under approved funding.
Correct.
Our deficit results from the unfunded portion.
Correct.
So
what I'm saying
just be careful about how that would balance our budget.
Right. It goes by, a complicated formula and et cetera. Yes, when we choose to do it, if we have extra people, then those EI and CPP portions of the positions that aren't funded, we have to pay extra, and it's millions. So, and that's hard to understand, but anyway, I do believe that it's legitimate to do a review of programs and delivery models. I think that's absolutely legit. I think if we just kept everything the same without an actual review, even if after the assessment we kept status quo, we do need to review. So I think the RISE review, for example, was legitimate. Okay.
If I can clarify that, we were told last spring by administration that they were doing program reviews in all kinds of different areas. Okay.
Right. My point hasn't changed from that. So I'm giving the rationale for my questions and where I'm at.
Okay, but you need to wrap up your time.
I was surprised that SEAC wasn't fully informed, or if they're not fully informed, that they didn't feel brave enough to actually put a motion forward saying, no, this is our advice to the board on behalf of the Special Education Advisory Committee, that we do like this, we don't like this, these are the areas that we want. We had a member on our SEAC years ago, you'll remember,
that advocated at our table at the advisory committee, special education advisory committee, for full inclusion strongly. So it's not something that we haven't been asked for from our community and our parents for a full inclusion model. I want to say I feel confident that the province will send a supervisor and remove the opportunity to revisit, for our trustees to revisit any budget changes, that they will make the changes. Having seen that, when supervisors come in at York, at Hamilton, at Ottawa, at Toronto, at Windsor Catholic, at all the Peel, at all the places that I've seen that, it's not negotiated who we get to pick. No, they send who they want, and their understandings will be bottom line. And they will not know, I assure you, they will not know the nuances of our area, our disproportionate amount of special education needs in the moderate to high needs category that we carry compared to our coterminous board who has a full inclusion. So I have questions around that. If we move towards a similar kind of model, I need some assurances. And because I wasn't there at the workshop, because I didn't have my questions prepared, I want to know some things.
Sorry, Trustee, you've used up your time, so we're going to move on.
Okay, I've got some questions.
And you may.
And I was asking on a point of personal privilege because I was not able to go to the workshop. So I want to make an informed decision.
Moving on to Trustee Nelson.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So we heard from the delegates, and it's obvious that reorganization may provide or propose some extreme challenges for those specifically in the RISE program. And so we heard things about, those needing one-to-one support, and some of them are 2 years behind their peers. And we also heard that this is not something that can be replicated in the classroom. And so I wonder if we can share, or if this is going to come through the collaboration portion of this plan, if we can share what will be put in place and what are the support services that students and staff will receive through this plan.
I will just say that that's very premature because we have committed to a consultation process, but I'll let the director, if she wants to add anything.
So a real high level, because we're here to approve the multi-year deficit recovery plan, not. And I appreciate that our community wants to know moving forward, and that's purposely why we included the last page about what our plan forward would be. I just want to clarify, we do not provide one-to-one support in the RISE program. So if that, I didn't hear that said, but we do not provide one-to-one support. In fact, there's very rarely educational staff outside of the teacher in those classrooms particularly. And yes, some of the students are behind their peers in grade levels. Having said that, we also have students in the regular classroom that are behind their peers also. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else for the first time wanting to speak to the motion? Sure, Trustee Cook.
Yeah. So this is really really difficult for me because of what I do in my day job. I totally understand where we are at as a board. Totally understand that. The RISE program is an awesome program. I personally think there needs to be a restructuring of the RISE program before this even came up. Because again, of what I do during the daytime, many of my kids are in the RISE program or have been. There's obviously a lot of good, but there's a lot of things that could be better. I believe in inclusion. I believe that sometimes what happens is some of the kids get into the RISE program and it becomes a lifetime school membership, and it shouldn't be. I think there's better things that we can do better. And I think that I get the budget issue, and this isn't the way that I'd like to go about it, but I think that we can get to a good place with spec ed, even with what we have to do with the budget. There has to be some changes, and it's for the kids, in my opinion. I've talked to a couple other trustees about it, and I just think that the restructuring, I think we have to have some trust moving forward. We're in a place right now where, and I see you shaking your head out there, but I'm very experienced in this area, and you can laugh, you could do what you want, but I believe that we can get to a really good place with spec ed, even with this. And I said, I think there has to be some trust. We don't have a choice right now. We don't have a choice. If we didn't vote for this to move forward with this multi-year plan, the government is not going to start from the top down. I guarantee you. Well, they're not, and you can say what you want. We can disagree, agree to disagree, but they won't. And then you'll be coming to us, because then you'll say, oh my God, look what they did, and you never told us. Well, I'm telling you. So there's a lot of good things that we can do as a board with our spec ed program. And I know that maybe doesn't sit well with a lot of people right now, but we need to trust. And it does need changes, and has needed some changes for a long time.
Thank you. Anyone else for the first time? Trustee Burgess, your question?
Thanks. I too think that full inclusion can meet the needs of the majority of, as the majority of school boards do it. And I think that we have to look at new models, and I don't like thinking that it's only a bottom line thing. So my question is, how are we going to meet our obligations concerning the recommendations about the right to read report in the right to read report, and how are we going to change our professional learning community so that one of the speakers talked about the collegiality between right now the RISE teachers and the classroom teachers. So my questions are about is it going to compromise us in making headway with the recommendations for the right to read if we have a full inclusion? Because we've been told that in past with RISE that it would help. So will it be compromised?
Is anyone able to answer that?
So
Director?
again, I'll give a very high level through you, Madam Chair, high level, because I don't want to get into specific programs and stuff about the multi-year deficit recovery plan. So the right to read is early interventions, long before many children would even enter into a Rise or Gains program. And we're seeing tremendous gains, particularly in the earliest years, from the work that's being done and the use of the screener in the regular classrooms, in the hopes that the students don't need interventions later on. We're very early in that from the report and the funding from the ministry, but so far, boards across the province are seeing gains in that area. The earlier the intervention, the better, before you start to, and I'll use the word stream, students into different programs.
So supplemental to that, though, the screener is the right to read screener that the province has given. Will the removal of speech paths and the reduction of the unfunded positions of speech pathologists and psych and social work compromise anything that we do in addition to that screening to help?
Thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. So there are specific funded positions for those that administer the screeners, either the homeroom teacher or the early intervention screener teachers administer those.
I have additional questions, and I was hoping that on a point of personal privilege I would have that. Thank you.
No. So I'm going to call the question. There's been a recorded vote requested.
Yes, I was going to request a recorded vote, please.
So I will explain that trustees, student trustees can vote if they choose, but it's not binding on the result. So I'm going to start on this side. Sarah, student trustee, would you like to vote on the motion? You have the right to pass because it's not binding.
No, thank you. That's okay.
Yeah, okay. Trustee McKinley?
Opposed.
Opposed. Trustee Burgess?
Support.
Trustee Armstrong?
Support with a lot of concern.
That's how we all feel. Our student trustee?
I'd like to not vote.
You can
on this one.
pass.
Thank you.
Trustee Buckler?
My nose.
Okay, I couldn't hear you very well, but I think you supported. Trustee Cook?
Support.
Support. The motion has passed, but I need to go to Trustee Nelson.
I do not support.
Okay. So the motion is passed. Thank you. Moving on to K2, with regard to the board meeting. We have someone to move this. Trustee Cook, Trustee Buckler. Anyone on the?
Madam Chair,
Yes?
may I just add
Sure. On K2?
on K2, just to add, as recommended by the Bylaw Review Committee?
Can we accept that as a friendly amendment? To approve the new board bylaws as recommended by the Bylaw Review Committee.
I need more clarification. There's too many distractions on.
Sorry, could you clear the room, please? They're being disruptive. They're being disruptive. Please. The motion is that the regular board meeting of December 3rd be canceled and a special board meeting be called on December 3rd to approve the new board bylaws as recommended by the Bylaw Review Committee. Is that a friendly amendment or do you want it to be formal?
I was just clarifying because as a member of the Bylaw Review Committee, I don't remember passing this
Oh, you
as a
haven't yet.
recommendation.
You haven't yet. I've given you a
Just
list of meetings
Starting
and
the review.
it'll be
All
done
right,
before
that's
December 3rd.
why
yeah.
I wanted the clarification. Thank you.
Correct. So a friendly amendment to approve the new board bylaws as recommended by the Bylaw Review Committee. Anyone have a question on the motion? Seeing none, I'm going to take the vote. All those in support? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's passed. Thank you.
Can you ask for opposition?
Sorry. Those opposed?
Alternate member of the board.
2. Item K3 to reschedule the organizational meeting of the board. Someone like to put that on the floor? Trustee Cook, Trustee Buckler. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in support? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That carries. Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to reports to be received. Item L1 is the report of the Director of Education.
Thank you. And thank you to those who stuck around to listen. So, as the leaves are quickly falling from the trees and Halloween already feels like a distant memory, we find ourselves adjusting to the shortened days. Can't believe how dark it is so early. and daylight savings time has quietly slipped in. Though the weather may not show it just yet, soon enough all the leaves will have fallen and we'll be welcoming our first snowflakes. This month's update is centered around the theme of community and our partnerships. In the spirit of working together, we'll explore how the staff and the students across GECDSB are actively contributing to and giving back within our community. So hunger remains a serious issue for many in Windsor and Essex County, with a growing number of individuals and families facing food insecurity. Last year, Windsor Essex Food Bank Association saw over 211,000 visits, and the need continues to rise. That's a 27% increase in first-time users. At the Possibilities Luncheon, hosted by the UHC Hub of Opportunities and the Culinary Federation of Windsor, delicious pasta dishes were prepared and served by our local vendors, including our very own Specialist High Schools major student and staff. This event not only allowed them to showcase their culinary skills, but also provided a meaningful opportunity to give back to the community. And myself and a few members of the senior admin had great pleasure in trying all of the pasta, and I will say that my vote went to North Star High School as the best pasta by far. And I know some of my friends from the culinary industry won't be appreciative of that comment, but by far they were the best, and not just because they're our students. All proceeds from Possibilities support vital programs like the Plentiful Harvest Food Rescue Program, our own community kitchen, and the food bank, with 100% of our donations ensuring that families facing hunger can access healthy and nutritious foods. Last week, we had a wonderful start of the day at Queen Victoria Public School, where we celebrated the Ontario Student Nutrition Program with the Building Bridges with Breakfast event, and it was a privilege to join the Soltz family in preparing a healthy breakfast options for our students. The Soltz Family Foundation has generally donated $130,000, which will support 29 Greater Essex County District schools, helping to ensure our students receive a nutritious food that they need to thrive. A heartfelt thank you to Principal Chris Pilon and the dedicated staff at Queen Victoria for their tireless efforts in running this vital program every single morning for students. This morning, we were up very bright and early. Myself and members of the senior admin team again went to Prince Edward Public School this morning, and we would truly appreciate the Soltz family for coming out to the school and to see firsthand the impact that their generous investment has in making a difference for the students. The students were so well behaved this morning. It was unbelievable, all sitting there. And we've learned very quickly that parfaits are the breakfast of the day when given an option. Lovely yogurt, berries, and then Cheerios on top. On October 18th, students from Westview Freedom Academy had a remarkable experience taking a field trip abroad, the Windsor Premier Cruises. Organized by the Opportunities for Learning and Success program, this trip allowed the students from history, civics, and geography classes to explore the deep connections between Windsor and Detroit, from the Ambassador Bridge to Dieppe Gardens and to the Gordie Howe Bridge. Students had the chance to learn about the rich history of the region from a unique vantage point. It was wonderful to see our students engaging with history in such an immersive way. Gore Hill Public School students celebrated Bus Driver Appreciation Day by honoring their dedicated bus driver, Mimi, Helena, Lisa, and Helena. Students expressed their gratitude by creating handmade cards filled with heartfelt messages and presenting each driver with a beautiful chrysanthemum plant. This gesture acknowledged the driver's daily commitment to ensuring students arrive at school and a safe return home. Again, you'll see the upcoming days of observance, and as we continue through November, we have the opportunity to reflect on several significant observances, including Treaties Recognition Week, Veterans Week, Indigenous Veterans Day, and Remembrance Day. These moments invite us to honor the service and the sacrifices of veterans, as well to recognize the importance of treaties and Indigenous contributions to our shared history. The dedication and the resilience continue to inspire all of us. In addition, World Kindness Day on November the 13th encourages us to spread kindness and compassion in our daily lives. Anti-bullying, While Bullying Awareness and Prevention Week for November 18th to the 22nd provides an opportunity to focus on creating a safe, inclusive environment for all our students and our staff, and I challenge you on November the 13th to do a random act of kindness for someone else. We invite you to share our website or follow us on social media to see how our schools across the board are fostering healthy relationships and building welcome, inclusive school communities. Thank you. Happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Did you try the parfait?
No.
Okay.
So I confess to the students, I don't like berries. But I eat them because I know they're good for you, but I would much prefer melon or grapes. But they ate the berries.
Good question, Trustee Cook. Yeah. Thank you very much, Director Houston. I don't believe we have a report tonight from our OPSPA director.
I have one from the delegate.
Okay.
Yep.
Trustee Burgess.
It's just an oral one. Nothing was prepared. We had a recent regional meeting, and for the same reasons I've given, I couldn't attend it in Stratford, and it was necessary to submit a board summary that we normally do in a templated form, and that hasn't been prepared that I know of. So in the next little while, I hope to ask trustees with their advice in order to give a Greater Essex update and submit that for the minutes, because it has been requested of me. I also would put a motion forward now that we have moved that the organizational meeting is December 10th. We will be without a director, and there is no alternate director for OPSPA because of the Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act of not allowing alternate directors. So Trustee Sibcar cannot attend and will not be the OPSPA director going forward. For the meeting at the end of November, I would self-nominate myself as a director for OPSPA, being the voting delegate and probably the most in the loop, to be only in effect until December 10th. So I would move that motion. I move that Julia Burgess be director for the meeting of November, whatever it is, the end of.
Okay, seconded by Trustee McKinley. Questions? No?
I'll support it as long as it's just until December 10th.
Just till December 10th.
Yeah, it was seconded by Trustee McKinley. Okay, any questions? No. Okay, all those in support? Any opposed? No, that's carried. Thank you, Trustee Burgess. L3 is an update on justice, inclusion, equity, and diversity actions. We have a report. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to the next report, L4, Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Strategy Report 2023-24, pages 30 to 42. Any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to thank everybody for those reports. And L5 is a chair's report. It's going to be very short. I wanted to first, I guess on behalf of our board, congratulate the former chair of the Toronto District School Board, who was chair up until yesterday, Rachel Chernows-Lynn, because she won the by-election in Toronto to become a city councillor. So congratulations to her on that. And the only other thing I wanted to do tonight, if I can find it, is I wanted to formally recognize Remembrance Day coming up. It's important to me, and I know that our board has a great working relationship with our Legions for our students. We have many programs, but as they say, they shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. And I give my thanks and gratitude to all men and women in our armed forces, all those who have served, all the veterans, and all those who didn't come home. But I did want to use this as a little teaching learning moment. This verse comes from a poem called For the Fallen. And if you're involved in the Legion like my family is, you know this version very, very well. But what I didn't realize, first of all, the author's name is Lawrence Binion. And the full poem is very moving if you want to read it. I can't imagine being a mother or a wife and sending my husband or my young sons off to war. But this was written and published in September of 1914, just a few weeks after the outbreak of World War I. This part of the full poem was adopted first by the Royal British Legion for remembrance ceremonies, and then, of course, it was the same was done by our Royal Canadian Legion. So I wanted to commemorate Remembrance Day coming up next week on behalf of all the trustees. And that ends my chair's report. Moving on to wherever I am on my agenda, because I've lost my paper. Again, trustee question period, thank you. Oh, sorry. The other thing I wanted to say in my chair's report is just, I've sent out several emails about upcoming dates for meetings, especially with regard to the bylaws, so just please mark them in your calendars. And you will be hearing from me soon about the draft of the bylaws and a bylaw review committee meeting. And just to point out that Sheila McKinnon has been very busy in the template that we just received from OPSPA with regard to Regulation 98 on electronic meetings and attendance. We all got that email from OPSPA, and that template was created by Sheila, so she's been busy. But I forgot to add that to my report. So anyway, trustee question period. Any questions for this meeting? Seeing none. Any notices of motion for this meeting? Seeing none. Any announcements for this meeting? Trustee McKinley, then trustee Burgess.
I'd just like to highlight that the cereal box challenges have begun and they will run until November 22nd. And I'd also like to thank our community partners that are the reason we're able to still continue the cereal box challenge. Sharp Bus Lines, 3 Aces Moving, and EDFO also donated toward the cereal box challenge this year, as well as an anonymous donor. And without those community partners, we're not able to move 500 bags full of cereal boxes. So I wanted to acknowledge them as well at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Burgess, your announcement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, I sent a message to my colleagues and admin asking for a little leeway on some of the items on our agenda. And I thanked you and the director for allowing delegations to speak today. I did state that I didn't want to have any whiff of disrespect misinterpreted from me for the difficult and in some cases heart-wrenching decision by admin to arrive at these recommendations. I think everybody's putting a very brave face on this, and it's important that if we're resolved to something, it does take a full team commitment. And I want everybody to know that I value this, the angst, the work, the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of departmental staff, directors, council, everything, all the meetings that to arrive at a place with the recovery plan. It was very difficult, and I don't want to diminish that and let anybody think in any way that I wasn't cognizant of the amount of work. I also thanked everybody for the kindness that you've shown me in my bereavement recently. I do feel disadvantaged, and I mentioned something because we have been deluged with phone calls, emails, messages, everything. We all have. Some of us have gotten, maybe more. I've been nonstop on the phone. I have not had an opportunity where I felt confident enough, safe enough, not floods of tears, in order to ask all my questions. I'm glad I got maybe half of them done today. But I did mention, because it was brought to our attention constantly, and it has been for all my 24 years of being on this board, and it was brought up by a speaker. Why do we continue to get student transfers from Windsor Essex Catholic District School Board from parents who are exacerbated with an inclusive model for their struggling kids with special education needs? And I remember years ago, Barry Finley at the time acknowledged that after, I think it was like 7 years of data crunching in the New Brunswick model and looking at all kinds of things, that it was shown that Greater Essex did have a disproportionate amount of moderate to high needs, kids with special education needs, and that our funding followed with a slight bump then. And so when I asked, is this an exaggerated myth? People think it didn't exist, and they're questioning it, and they're questioning, why are we going to an inclusive model if other parents are not finding the help? So I'm happy in supporting it, but I want to offer an apology because I can see where that might have been really honestly misinterpreted. I'm not saying that any of the numbers that we crunched, any of the discussions were not heart and soul.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Is this not announcements?
It's an announcement of an apology that I tried to extend. So it's an announcement that I would like to make an apology to senior admin. Yes, it is, ma'am.
Okay, wrap
it is
it up.
an announcement.
That's
it.
Trustee Burgess, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
It's sincere, and I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other announcements? Okay, well, we've come to the end of our approved agenda, so I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned at 9:28 or so. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you.